Hi, I'm Riley.
And I'm Ryder. And this is my dad's show.
Hey everybody, it's Casey Jacox with the Quarterback Dadcast. I want to say thanks to all of our listeners, thanks to all of our sponsors for all your support. We are continuing to enjoy this journey together, inspiring dads, but I want to take a minute now to talk about Acme Homes. You've heard me talk about them before, but I'm going to talk about them again. Bob Cumming, former college teammate, amazing leader, amazing home builder. They continue to take so much pride in the work they do, the craftsmanship, the attention to detail. Whether you're looking for a home up in Monroe, up in Sultan, up in Wenatchee, this is where they're doing their amazing things. So many people during the pandemic, as we have the ability to work from home, have decided to move out of the city to try to find homes where there's more acreage. Well, that's exactly what Bob and team at Acme Homes give you. So check out Valley Vista up in Monroe. Check out Daisy Meadows out in Sultan. And if you want to even go to Eastern Washington, check out Sienna Heights in Wenatchee. They're, again, amazing craftsmanship, amazing floor plans. You can visit them at acmehomeswa.com. And if you're interested in learning specifically about listings or mortgage opportunities, contact Jen at 425-308-8082 or Denise at 425-309-2318. So now, why are we doing a new ad? Because we want to talk about a partnership they have with Portage Bank. Kevin Jensen is one of the great lenders over there. He's a senior vice president. He's going to take care of you. And right now, if you obtain a mortgage through Portage Bank, Bob and team at Acme Homes are going to pay your $500 appraisal fee. I said that right. They're going to pay your $500 appraisal fee by buying a home through them, getting your mortgage through the folks at Portage Bank. So don't wait. Now's the time to contact Jen, contact Denise. Again, Jen's number is 425-308-8082. Again, Denise is at 425-309-2318. Visit acmehomeswa.com right now. Don't wait. Thank you again for listening to the Quarterback Dadcast. So with that, let's get right to today's episode. Hey everybody, good morning. It's Casey Jacox with the Quarterback Dadcast, and we are kicking off season 3. We are in January right now. This episode will come out sometime in the first quarter of this year. I want to say a huge shout out to Patrick Surmeyer for making this next connection, because our next guest, his name is Jeremiah Stokes. He's a licensed mental health counselor, which I'm excited to learn more about. He's a sole practitioner. He is an adjunct professor. He is doing amazing things to help divorce mediation and help families who go through these difficult times. He's a father of 3. He has done mental performance coaching. He's worked with athletes. He's a former athlete himself. But with all that said, we're going to hear about that. But we're more interested to hear about Jeremiah, the dad. We're going to learn about how Jeremiah, how he grew up, how his father and mother and family impacted him. So without further ado, Mr. Jeremiah Stokes, welcome to the Quarterback Dadcast.
Casey, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You
Glad
bet.
to be here.
Well, we this season, I'm going to be commenting it on every episode, regardless of when we record. But as we talked before we started, I'm dedicating season 3 to my father, Mike Jacox, Big Mike. He passed away on December 29th. And every episode I'm going to dedicate to him, just to show him some love and so many great memories that we had together. And again, why I'm doing this podcast reminds me of the impact dads have on kids. Moms do too, but I mean, obviously this show is mainly for dads, and just the role and impact we can have on our kids is so huge. But with that said, I want to know, Jeremiah, what are you most grateful for as a father today?
Oh man. Well, first of all, sorry to hear about the loss of your father, Casey. It's in terms of gratitude as a dad, I would say that more than anything, I'm grateful for my kids' health and well-being. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's so many stories and issues out there with kids and, just their safety and their health. And so I am, incredibly grateful for my kids' just health and overall well-being.
Yeah, that's a good answer, man. Sometimes that's the easy answer, but it's one that's super powerful, and one that when you don't have your health, you quickly realize, man, I wish I had it back. I think I told you before we started recording, we had COVID hit our house during Christmas. So we had a quarantine Christmas, which sucked, but it was, we're all healthy, knock on wood now. I'm grateful for not only my health to our kids and family health, but I'm grateful that my kids saw me as the dad go through some seriously raw emotions when my dad passed, and from all different types of emotions. And I'm just grateful that I could be my authentic self, and they saw it, and they know that it's okay to cry. They didn't know it's okay to be concerned. They know it's okay to just embracing emotions. I'm grateful that we had that experience as a family.
Yeah, that's a blessing. I mentioned to you, I lost my dad in 2019 as well. And there was a similar process for me. My kids were able to see a vulnerability in me that they had never seen before. And not that I wasn't willing to show, but I had never been through a loss like that, at least in their lifetime. And so, we openly, we as a family as a whole, really openly grieved and mourned and expressed those emotions. And that's such an important thing. I mean, especially for what I do as a living, as a therapist, I mean, this is something that we, professionally, we promote this in people, right? We advocate for, freedom of emotional expression and vulnerability. But it's one thing to promote it professionally and then to live it, personally. But I think that's a great thing that you did for your kids.
Thanks, man. Well, I want to hear, what does the huddle look like? So you're the quarterback of the family. Tell me about what the team looks like, the roles, and who's on the team.
Yeah. So it's me and my wife, my wonderful wife, Lisa. And then my three kids, my oldest is Elijah. We call him Eli. He's 8. My daughter, Amelia, is 6, call her Emmy. And then my youngest, Elliot, my little firecracker, he's 5 years old. And we have a great dynamic. We have a great system. I work a lot. Start out with that. I work a lot. My wife is a preschool teacher. She works a few days a week, but my role as a clinician, business owner, professor, I work a lot. We have a system to where the weekends are really dedicated for family time. And so I spend a lot of time Saturday and Sunday with my wife and with my kids. But Monday through Friday, my work schedule is pretty intense. But we kind of have this like acute thing on the weekends where it's like dad time, right? And so that's coaching. You mentioned, I coach my youngest and my oldest flag football. And just, going to the parks, riding bikes. I'm a huge advocate for fathers of multiple children. I'm a huge advocate for one-on-one time with each kid. Mm-hmm. And that's a really challenging thing to do, especially if you're busy, which many of us are. But I mean, there are Saturdays where like I will take one for a few hours, then I'll drop one off, take the other, and then and that system works really well. So I try to focus on like individualized dad time, but then also like collective dad time.
That's awesome. I experienced that recently. And I've had a lot of dads who I've interviewed in the first 2 seasons. They talk about that too, which is great advice for dads at home is carving out that one-on-one time. And, my son and I play a ton of golf together. The other night I was in a gym rebounding from my daughter and just joking around. We played one-on-one and had a couple of times where I just straight swatted the heck out of her and was like, she was like, "What are you doing, Dad?" I'm like, "Figure it out, girl. Get a shot up on me." And I'm obviously 6'2". She's 5'4". But then she started doing it. It was pretty fun just to kind of mess with her. And then she realized like, no, I better figure this out. So
we got to challenge them, right? We got to challenge them.
Yeah, life's not going to be easy. We know that. So tell me, how did you become a licensed mental health counselor? Tell me how that got in that line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the listeners, licensed mental health counselor is the equivalent to a licensed psychotherapist. Different states have different titles, but so I provide psychotherapy and counseling. I got into that line of work. I myself, at a young age, 18, 19, around undergraduate time, went into therapy myself. I didn't know anything about it. I was referred and I met this therapist. It was a guy. And the experience was transformational. At the time I was majoring in education. I was going to be a high school teacher. And then my experience in therapy, I went and changed my major to psychology, and went that route. But it was such a transformative experience that I knew that's what I wanted to do for my life. And, people talk about like a calling, and depending on your belief system, people have different perceptions of what that is, but I truly believe that I was called to this work. There's no doubt in my mind.
So when you think about, if you feel like comfortable sharing, I'm very curious you're going to find out, Jeremiah. Like you said, there was a transformation experience. Tell me more about that.
Well, so I was a young guy, right? And it was like the first time in my life. I mean, I had relationships and experiences where there was like this in-depth dynamic going on, right? Like I knew remnants of what that was and what that felt like. But when I went into therapy, that was on a whole nother level. It was like me and this other human being were on this journey of self-exploration. And examining my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors, my relationships, my childhood, my goals, my life, And so what I realized is that like psychotherapy is this like can be this like microcosm of one's life. And I just thought that was so cool. And I was always interested in human behavior anyway. And so I was sold after that.
That's awesome. Very cool, man. So I want to go back and learn about how you grew up. And I'd love to learn about how your parents impacted you. And now that you're a dad today, so maybe talk about what was like growing up in your home.
Yeah, absolutely. My parents my mom's still alive, are incredible people. I mean, they were, objectively speaking. I was raised in Sanford, Florida. Sanford is a town about 20 miles north of Orlando. Sanford's got a lot of history to it, a lot of cultural history. It's a really mixed environment. I grew up not poor, but certainly not wealthy. Grew up middle class at certain parts of my development. I would say even like lower middle class. And grew up with two people who had very different personalities, but had very similar values. And so my mom was a high school English teacher at Seminole High School, which is the high school in Sanford, for like 40 years. She's one of those people, like everybody that meets her is like, oh, your mom is such an angel. Like she's one of those people. She really is just like just a complete sweetheart. She was very loving and compassionate, and she had all those great characteristics. And then my dad was, an amazing guy, a really extraordinary guy, really smart guy, but really like a tough dude. He was one of the toughest dudes I ever knew. And that's like objectively. And also people will come up to me and say, hey, your dad's the toughest guy I ever knew. Like I hear that from people on the streets. It never fails. He played offensive line at Florida State from 67 to 71. But he had multiple careers and did all kinds of stuff. He was an assistant principal for a while. Then he became an RN. He was a business owner. One of the things I learned from my parents, though, was work ethic. Like I learned at a very young age that if you work hard enough in life and anything that you want, you can get whatever you want. And so, I think in my house, there was a culture of, work ethic and values and commitment were definitely themes. But, I had these two, I don't want to say polarities, because my dad also had a capacity to be very loving. But, I had like this big, strong male figure. And then I had this like nurturing maternal figure. And so I was blessed to have that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. So random small world, I actually was introduced to another former Florida State offensive lineman. I think his name's Todd Fordham. He played in, I want to say the 90s sometime.
Okay.
Great episode. Yeah. I mean, anytime, so a former quarterback, Uncle Rico moment, here we go. Your love for the Hogs up front is, you got to love the O-line brotherhood. And those guys, they're tougher than hell. All of them. They're mean, they're nasty, but they definitely have a teddy bear side to them too. I found, but yeah, I love the Hogs. So tell me why your dad was so tough. Like, how did you know he was tough?
So true story. Well, now I have crazy stories.
Love them.
This is one of the craziest. So he was out working. He was just doing some work around the house, and he was like, hitting a piece of wood or trying to take nails out of wood. And I was probably like 5 or 6 and I was in the living room. He was out back doing this. And, he was banging on this thing. And then he walked into the house and he said to my mom, he's like, I think there's something in my eye. Well, I look at him, he's got a nail in his eye, right? Like right in the white part of his eye. And my mom's freaking out. She's like, you got to go to the hospital. And he goes and he looks, we had this this small guest bathroom. And I'm looking at him through the living room and he's just right in front of the mirror and he just grabs the nail and just pulls it right out of his eye.
What?
And yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
He's like a transformer.
Yeah. He was something. But he could also though, just the way that people would respond to him, if, he was just so formidable is the adjective that I would use, right? Like if somebody pissed him off, he would, he didn't have to do much to let you know that you were in trouble kind of thing. And people just were like, they would respond to him. So I grew up kind of watching this, but then again, like you mentioned, like he had this really soft, sweet part to him as well. But yeah, those were the kind of things that I was exposed to as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as you think about your life now as a dad, 3 kids, busy job, describe what lessons you learned from your parents now that specifically parenting lessons that you're doing the same that they did, or maybe things that, and then transversely, maybe a couple things maybe you're doing differently that they didn't do.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that cliche saying, right? Like we do what worked that you learned from your parents and then reinvent in those areas where maybe they lacked or whatever. I would say that I definitely like the commitment, right? Like the commitment to what is right, the commitment to what is good, and instilling that in my kids, above all, right? Like that is, a top priority of mine that I think I'm mirroring. Like you try to do the right thing. You try to do your best, these general things, but that truly make the difference in a kid's life. Right. So I definitely, I want to model those things. One of the things I don't want to work as much as my dad did. And I'm kind of I'm following in his footsteps. So I want to have a little bit more work-life balance. My dad ended up getting a little bit of that towards the end of his life. But I mean, he still worked up till the day he died, and he was young when he died. He was 69, but so I want to be able to have more of this work-life balance. When I mentioned earlier, when you asked about the dynamic with my family, and I told you how, the weekends are for my kids, I'm not necessarily proud of that. I want to have weekday evenings with my kids too. Do you know what I mean? So the goal is, once some professional things pan out and my business expands a little bit more and I can have a little bit more passive income, the goal is to work a normal person's hours, if you will, right? And to have those evenings and to have that availability. So being able to optimize that work-life balance is definitely something that I want to have that, my parents had to work really hard, so we didn't have that.
So for dads listening at home, I'm sure there's a lot of dads who can relate to whether starting a business or they have a stressful job or intense job that demands a lot. And one of the things we've talked to a lot of dads about is just the power of being present. How do you stay present when you got a job that demands a lot of you? And
so for me, it's the technical skill of staying present is a thing, right? And so this is actually something that I go over in therapy with people, and this is what I apply to my life. And so we have there's different terms and different vehicles that can get a person to be present, but the one that most people are probably familiar with is mindfulness, flow state. So I have a toolkit that I use to literally stay present. In our culture, everybody's always you got to be present, but they don't tell you how to be present. And so for me, it's always getting out of the thinking brain and going into my senses, right? So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm at the park with my kids, and then I'm thinking about everything I got to do at work. Well, in that moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ground myself, right? I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to look at my kids. I'm going to look at the sunlight. I'm going to feel the wind. I'm going to utilize my senses to pull me into that moment and get out of that critical thinking brain that I'm usually in when I'm at work. And so that's the kind of the toolkit that I use. And there's tons of research that actually supports that works. It works really, really well. It's just implementing it and utilizing it on a daily basis is I think the challenge.
Love that. I wrote that down. Utilize your senses to get out of thinking brains. Too often, just because we're having dinner with our kid, but we're on our phone, that's not having dinner with your kid. Your kid's trying to talk to you and you're watching the football game. You're not making eye contact with them. That's not being present. Your wife's trying to talk to you about something that's important to her and you're on your phone. Yep, honey, what? That's not being present. What you just said also spoke to me about no one's teaching. And when I wrote a book called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. And in business, people always say, you got to go build relationships. You got to go out and build more relationships, but no one's teaching them. And for me, that was one of the goals of my book is 6 like common sense things we can do to build relationships. And in chapter 3, I talk about the difference between listening and hearing. Mm-hmm. Hearing is subconscious. Listening is conscious, I always say. Like it takes commitment, like putting the phone down. No offense to Apple or all the smartwatch people. Worst invention ever, I think. Yes. Or maybe the notification feature is the worst because it's like, bzz, I'm sending notification. Listeners we can't see, but we, Dr. Stokes and I can see each other on video. But like when you look at your watch, that doesn't send a good signal to the person you're talking to, build a relationship.
Right.
So I think it's great that you're giving those tools. And dads, again, I'll repeat this: utilize your senses to get out of the thinking brain. And the work I do at Limitless Minds, it totally, I learned so much about mindset and staying neutral and the power of thought and how your thoughts become things and how an event leads to a story, leads to a response. All those things is powerful stuff. So if you want to learn more about science, dads at home, please research this stuff because it is legit. As you think about like your journey of fatherhood, is there a story that you share? You talked about, you're super close to your dad. Is there a story or two that meant a lot to you that you share with your kids just to help honor your father to them besides the nail in the eye?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My dad and I, one of the things that we did together, and I wish we would have done more of it. But we got into it as I was a little bit later in like teens. But we would go hiking in the Appalachian Mountains. So that was a thing that we would go and do. We would do it if we could. We'd try to get out there, once a year, once every couple of years. And, for the listeners that are familiar with the Appalachian Trail, it's a trail that runs 2,500 miles from Georgia to Maine. And it's just a huge hiking thing that a lot of people are attracted to. But we would go out there and we would do, hiking, camping trips. And so what I'm doing is I've decided, I took my oldest, who's 8, actually in November, I shut everything down with work and I took him, just he and I, up to the Appalachian Mountains, and we got a cabin and we were up there for like 4 or 5 days. And it was this really, like, honestly, the only word that I can use is magical, because like I felt the spirit. I felt my dad's spirit, and it was just so amazing to have that moment where like I was able, this like generational thing, right? Like I had these memories with my father, and then I was able to bring my son there and I was able to kind of share that with him, and he was able to experience that. And we were by the waterfalls and the mountains, and I could tell he was really taking it in. So, just doing, being able to do more things like that. That's the goal.
That's awesome. How, shout out to your wife, man, for supporting that, because I think a lot of busy households, they're like, what, 4 or 5 days you're gone? Well, so shout out to your wife for supporting that. Cause I think that's really cool to make sure what you and the partner are aligned with what is important to the family. What a cool experience to be able to go, and hopefully maybe the cell phone didn't work as well up there.
It didn't at all, actually. Like we would have to go into the nearest town for reception. But yeah, shout out to my wife, because I haven't really, she's a rock star. I mean, she is absolutely the glue that holds everything together. And she's just so incredibly supportive of everything, my career, just the whole thing. Without her, none of this could run and operate the way that it does. But yeah, we had to, we had to go to Boone was the nearest city to get some reception, which was a good thing,
That's awesome. How did you guys meet, out of curiosity? You and your
So
wife?
we actually met online. And now, funny story though. I was at the time I was working at an office, and this was when online dating, this was 2011. So online dating was just starting to really take effect. It wasn't huge like it is now. And I had a colleague say, "Hey, I met somebody online. You should give it a shot." So this is a true story. She was the first profile that I clicked, and I was the first profile that she clicked.
Wow.
It was our first online date, and then we met and we were married in 6 months. I mean,
Wow.
we had a quick turnaround, yeah. And really, what was interesting is that her high school boyfriend, her first high school boyfriend, ended up marrying my first high school girlfriend, and we went to different schools.
No
So
way.
it was one of those weird situations. But yeah,
What about the profile made you both click?
I don't know, man. What do they say? When you know,
Yeah.
right? Like, there was just something there that was pulling me in.
Yeah. My wife and I have dated since 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we are 45 years, almost 46. So we're, been together a long time, and I still feel like at times I joke around like a 14-year-old dork, and make my kids laugh. And, like this is, I don't know why this is the one thing I'm so random. I think the listeners have realized that about me, but you ever played the game Categories?
Yeah.
So like I'm the one of my passion about categories is like trying to think of the most kind of bizarre random thing when you try to like work the system to kind of think of a word that like is going to get some double points. Well, there was the one that came up was terms of endearment, and it was a W. And I, with all ounce of sarcasm, dead straight face pan, try to convince my wife and my kids that I call my wife Wigglebum. And my kids are like, "What?" I'm like, "You guys didn't know that? Yeah, I've been calling mom that for years." And she's like, "No, you don't." I'm like, "Yes, I do." And we had this like sarcasm, and then finally I broke. We all started laughing, but it's like stuff like that like it's fun just to. And again, why I shared that, I have no idea, but it made me think about just like the when and definitely I know I married up, and I'm very, very lucky to, and even all the stuff I went through with my father, my wife, you think about the vows, sickness to health and sickness and health. She was there for everything.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's in 7th grade. Wow. That's like a record. I don't think I've ever known anyone that has married their 7th grade girlfriend. You mentioned, this is worth mentioning too, since we're talking about in sickness and in health. My wife and I went through hell. In 2017, January 16th of 2017, she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer.
Mm.
So she had just given birth to our third. He was only about a couple weeks old, and out of nowhere, golf ball size lump on her chest. And we think, even though OBGYN said it's probably just a blocked milk duct, this happens once you give birth, no big deal. Well, she goes in, gets it biopsied, and sure enough, it's cancer, and it's bad. And so at this point, we've got 3 babies. They're all in diapers. She gets this diagnosis. I'm in the middle of my doctoral dissertation. I'm also working at a mental health agency 50 hours a week. We got 3 screaming, crying kids. She has to do 6 months of chemo, loses all her hair, double mastectomy. They remove both breasts, 4 or 5 months of radiation. We didn't know she was going to live or die. It was bad. And we went through it, and we got through it. And I'll tell you, you hear about people saying, it's those kinds of things that make you stronger. And I can tell you, I'm living proof of that. We are inseparable. We are absolutely inseparable because of that journey. And she's good. She's been cancer-free for years. No sign of any kind of cancer. She was completely healed, but it was a nightmare getting through.
Wow. How did you, got goosebumps, man. How did you stay, I don't even know what the right word is, like mentally right with all that?
Let me tell you something.
What did you use? Prayer, support?
Let me tell you something. When I tell you I got knocked on my ass, I mean, I got knocked on my ass. And I mean, it's like you're living your life and you're already living the craziness, and then you get that. There's nothing that can prepare you for that. And I remember one night she was at the hospital recovering from one of her surgeries.
Hey everybody, it's Casey Jacox. I want to take a quick break to talk about my friends up at Catch Sitka Seafoods, who continue to be just an amazing loyal sponsor. And for those of you who've tried it, thank you. For those of you who haven't, you're missing out. And now's the time to make sure that you visit catchsitkaseafoods.com and get some of those amazing smoked salmon. Get some of that amazing rockfish, blackfish, black cod, salmon, whatever it might be, whatever you like. But what's great about opportunities they have, now's the time to subscribe to a box so that you're going to get that reliable cadence of the best fish directly from the dock to the doorstep. And what's great about Catch Sitka Seafoods, they make it so easy. So those that maybe aren't the best chefs at home, doesn't matter. They're going to give you this beautiful, nice laminated recipe card that tells you exactly how long to cook it, whether you're going to barbecue, you're going to bake, you're going to fry, whatever the way you want to do it, they're going to make it easy. So please visit them today, catchsitkaseafoods.com. Sign up for a subscription so that you're going to get the best fish delivered directly to your door. You won't regret it. And just like my daughter Riley says, Dad, I don't even like fish. And she does now because of my friends up at Catch Sitka Seafood. So with that, let's get right back to today's episode.
And I'm laying on the bed and I've got a 3-year-old next to me, a 2-year-old next to me, and then an infant and they're all screaming and crying, wanting mommy. And I'm sitting there and I remember going, I'm living in hell. This is a nightmare. Not knowing if she's going to not knowing what's next, right? But let me tell you what got me through it. First and foremost, God, 100%. I've always been a huge advocate for spirituality and prayer. But I remember specifically one night I got on my knees in the living room at the house we were living at. I'll never forget it. Got on my knees, and I remember exactly how I was sitting. I had my elbows on the couch, and I was just completely bawling my eyes out, pleading, begging God, please, anything. I'll give my life. I'll give myself anything. Just please get her through this. And I really believe he did. And we had people praying all around the world, really. I mean, we literally had people in different countries praying, family across the country. We had prayer just going like crazy. But then I had the support. I had her parents, which were just unbelievable support. Anytime I needed them to watch the kids, they were there. My parents, this is going back to my parents. My dad was still alive at the time. I mean, if I whatever I needed, he was right there. They were right there. I also ended up getting laid off at that agency job I was at. So I was in the middle of my dissertation. The agency that I was working for laid me off in the middle of all her treatments. So we had financial, but I had all this support all around me. And for me to say that I was perfect during that time, I wasn't. I was a basket case. But every day was like, okay, we're getting through this. And so it was always about like envisioning her well and healthy. I would make her, we had done a lot of research on diets. So every morning I'd wake up at 6 a.m. before work. I'd prep all her foods, juices, get everything ready for her during the day. And we fought through it.
Damn. Dude, cancer sucks, man. I have had 3 buddies lose wives to cancer before 40 years old. It's my biggest fear with, and man, I'm sorry you guys went through that. I'm so happy you got through it. It's funny, man. I'm not I don't go to church, not for any other reason. Whatever doesn't work out, but I'm very spiritual, like very, very spiritual. And, sometimes I'll read scripture and it makes sense to me. Sometimes I don't. But man, I can say like when my dad passed, I remember holding his hand and his breathing was like every 4 seconds, sometimes every 7 seconds, not in pain. He was super comfortable. And I remember saying like holding his hand and breathing and then close my eyes, put my head down, a couple of tears come down. And I said, I said, God, just please let him pass peacefully when he's ready, but whatever else I said. And I remember I heard like a little noise. He kind of like had this little wince in his face and he was gone like within seconds. And so like that to me means the non-believer would say, well, it's just time. I mean, I 100% believe that. Like I believe you meet people for a reason. I believe in serendipity. I look for those cues just because it just creates more of a positive life. Absolutely. And versus I always joke, I'd rather be a naive optimist than a negative realist.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I guess tell me how your wife's doing post. I mean, healthy and she's hanging through in there and
Healthy as a horse. And so and for the listeners that don't know, when someone goes through serious cancer, the rest of their lives are always going to involve tests, particularly PET scans, CT scans, typically every 6 months, every year. So she goes, and when it's that time of year, we're kind of getting psychologically ready. But we truly believe that she has been healed. And I'm like you too, Casey. I would consider myself more spiritual than religious, right? And that's been part of her thing. Like, even though cancer is the worst thing that's ever happened to her, it's almost in this weird way. And I hope I'm not out of line by saying this because she hasn't said this to me, but it's also one of the best things that's ever happened to her, right? Because I think it's truly shown me, it's shown us how fragile life is. And so there's just so much gratitude in our house, right? Like I wake up every day and the fact that she's just, and I could be pissed off at her. Don't get me wrong. We could be in the middle of an argument, but I look at her, it doesn't matter what the argument is, in the back of my head I'm going, damn, I'm glad she's alive. You know what I mean? And so that trumps everything. That trumps any trivial, superficial argument that we may be having. But she's all about taking care of herself, and she doesn't get stressed. A little bit, but she doesn't allow stress to really overtake her life. And it was a huge learning experience for her as well. So
it's interesting when we go through difficult times. It gets you to focus on those perspective and the non-trivial stuff. I mean, my wife's going through some health stuff. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And we left. She had an endoscopy and colonoscopy on yesterday morning, and we left. We had to leave because we're getting crazy amounts of snow in Seattle right now, which is just not normal for us. And we live on the bottom of a really steep hill. And I get about a quarter of the way up and had to turn around. Couldn't get up the hill. And I could feel like my stress starting to get up. I could feel her stress starting to get up. And so I had to freaking chain up. And, once I get the chains on, I get her to the appointment, like we're supposed to be there at 7:15, get her there at 7:14, and she and I are both early people. So we were both like on edge, but in the end, I'm like, who gives a shit? Pardon my French, not that big a deal. Right. And in the end, we made it. And, I don't know. I think this is what a lot of this podcast and talking to so many dads has helped me is just focusing on the present, focusing on my patience, which is my gap that I work on, just being a competitive person, and then expectation management, things that are in my head versus things that are in reality, or sometimes not always, that's another gap that I work on. But just perspective is so important. But I guess I transitioned then. I shared with you, patience and then just communication and things in my head and making sure my wife and people aren't mind readers in my life. Talk about an area of your dad game that you're striving or working hard to get better at, the dads at home might be able to relate to.
Yeah, like I feel like it's truly, there's a couple different things. I think the first thing, like recognizing just how impressionable our kids are. Like we don't realize it. I recommend a really good book for the listeners. Dan Siegel is a neuroscientist, and he's got several different books on parenting. But what's really cool, like the best one is The Whole Brain Child. So WHOLE, The Whole Brain Child. He also, The Developing Mind is another one where he talks about the brain and relationships. So he studies this thing called interpersonal neurobiology. And basically it just looks at how our relationships function or how our brains function within interpersonal relationships. So I say all that because like when I have to be really, really mindful that like every interaction I have with my kid, every single thing that my kid sees me do, everything they hear me say, everything they don't hear me say, everything they don't hear me do, like I have to remember that how impressionable they are. Like we forget that, right? Mm-hmm. I forget that, hey, like me handling this particular incident in such and such way is going to have a profound impact on my kid, whether I realize it or not. So just like really engaging in that intentional awareness all the time with them. And then also like being really mindful that I have to nurture each one of my kids' individual personalities for who they are, because like a lot of parents, like we have ideal, you mentioned expectations earlier in a different context. Like we don't want to admit it, but most of us have these idealistic expectations for our children, and some of those expectations I think are good, but then a lot of times those specific expectations may not fit for that particular child. Right. And like, I have 3 very different children. And so it's learning how to navigate those different personalities, because like my daughter may need something from me emotionally in one instance where my son doesn't, or my other son doesn't, and vice versa. So it's like being able to really be as dialed in as possible to who they are as unique human beings. And that's, I think, a challenge, but I'm working on that.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. I think it's, they are impressionable and every kid's different. I joke that like my daughter, toughest one in our house, my son and I, we get an injury my daughter has, he and I would be airlifted probably, make fun of us, but yeah. And again, I love that he talked about these expectations we put on our kids. Cause I think about the youth sports world. I've done episodes on that where, not all of our kids are going to the NFL or WNBA. In the end, to me, and I work very hard on this. I want whether they're a good athlete or good piano player or good artist, who cares? Are they a good citizen? Do they show up on time? Do they shake a good hand? Do they listen? Are they thoughtful? That's what's important. Not did they score 16 points in an AAU game?
Absolutely.
Right. And yet we lose track of that.
Totally. And, you mentioned like the competitive, the level of competitiveness now. And you alluded to earlier some of the work that I do in my practice. And I know I don't want to switch us too far off different directions, but just like, I think this has a lot to do with parenting. It is particularly athletically, it is such a competitive culture out there.
Yeah.
And, there's some healthy parts of competition. We know that, right? But then there are some really devastating things. What I'm seeing a lot now is that these kids, and you've probably heard of this, Casey, I'm sure in many instances, these kids are burnt out by 13. I get some kids some families come in and they, it's like, hey, we want our son. He's lost his groove pitching. Like and I sit down with the kid and he's completely gassed, completely burnt out, done, like over baseball, pitching every weekend since he was 4, And so like, I think to your point, like figuring out whatever that thing is, having that kind of that delicate balance in the process.
Yeah, it is, man. And I think you're right. Burnout is legit. I think it's, we as parents and dads specifically have to be not afraid to show leadership by saying, hey, maybe we need a weekend off. And if to give your family a time together versus it's going to cut into 2 minutes of their playing time. Well, in the end, is that family weekend more important? They're going to remember the time in the camping trip like you went on, or are they going to remember a random tournament in frickin' Orlando, right?
Exactly.
And in the moment, you don't think so, but once they get older, and I'll tell you, man, you said something a second ago that hit me in the heart about kids are impressionable. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I did it. I don't know what made me do it, but so that my dad passed away at 12:55 on December 29th. I got back to the house around we were cleaning out his assisted living facility, maybe 3-4ish o'clock. And my wife was, being stoic as usual and tough. And I knew something wasn't quite right. And so we had to go, something was right. And I'm like, there was like a concern of like a blood clot. And I was like, this is not right. And I literally, so the day my dad dies, I have to take my wife to the ER.
Oh man.
And so she's going to the ER, and now I'm telling all I thought about was my kids. Like how are they going to see me react? Mm. And whatever reason, and maybe that's a blessing of God, I just like, you got to freaking step up, dude. You can't freak out. You got to we're sad about my dad, but right now we got to take care of me and my wife and my health and kids. You good? Yep. All right. And we came back and, talked about it, but like, it was just like those moments. I know, I hope that in 10, 15 years, they'll remember that, like, man, dad kept his together. He didn't freak out.
That's amazing. Yeah. Cause like and that's where you can't even like write that, right? Like those two things happening. Right. And we're not, we're prepared as we are when something like that happens. It's like in that moment, how am I going to respond as a father? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, okay. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to hear about, from all your experience, whether it's the line of work you do, whether it's from your own parents, whether what you've experienced, and then summarizing everything we've talked about today. If you had to say, hey, here are 2 or 3 things, kind of nuggets of wisdom that dads at home can take from our conversation, they can use as tools to become that ultimate leader of their home. Tell me what comes to mind when I ask you that.
I would say the first thing is that it is up to us. It's our responsibility to have that balance as fathers and as men, that balance of optimal strength, right? Like I'm going to stand in front of you in any storm. I'm going to be there for you no matter what. I will always fight for you. That strength and everything that we do. But then also that vulnerability, right? I'm going to show my emotion. I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to cry in front of you if that's what it takes, right? I'm going to be emotionally vulnerable and emotionally available, and I'm going to know you as my child and as my wife, and you're going to know me, like a deep knowingness. So they did all this research on marriages. They did like 40 years of research on couples to find what the most effective variable for relationships. And it's so simple what I'm going to tell you. This is all it is. They studied thousands of couples. The number one thing that makes for an effective marriage is feeling known by your partner. So individuals and couples who felt completely emotionally known were the most successful relationships. Because there's so many relationships. I work with so many families as a therapist, and I work with so many couples where they don't really know each other. Like the father doesn't really know his daughter, or the wife doesn't really know her husband, right? Like there's these relationships that are all operating on this superficial layer and level, right? So I would say, like, let's go deeper. Let's take this where we need to take it, which is as deep as possible with the people in our life that we love and we care about. In order to do that, we have to be vulnerable and open. And I think we have to know ourselves.
I love that. Balance as fathers, making or helping our family become effectively known, and then go deeper with each other. So when you say go deeper, I have something I use, a frame of a question format, but are there things that you use or that you can advise people home to help them go deeper?
Yeah. So I think one of the big, there's a couple different pathways. One of the most effective pathways is emotionality, right? Like if I know what you're feeling about something, and we hear this term feelings, and our mainstream culture has it kind of confused. Like they hear the term feelings and they think, oh, feelings, those are like gushy things that don't matter. No. Feelings are part of your neurobiology. That is your brain, right? Like feelings, we feel before we think, literally as infants. Like when we create that attachment to our caregivers, like feeling is one of the first experiences that we have as human beings. So when we are able to know what we're feeling, when we're able to know what that other person is feeling deeply, that can get to the core of that moment with that individual. So know what that person is feeling and know what you're feeling.
I love that. I think curiosity, I'm looking at a poster on my wall right now that says, be curious, not judgmental. And the more curious, and that's from Ted Lasso, but the more curious we become, I think it gives yourself so many opportunities to learn. I use a framework called TED, which is tell me, explain, describe. And I think the power of asking great questions in any relationship is how you learn about others. Okay. So if people want to learn more about you, Dr. Stokes, if they want to learn more about, the line of work you do, if they want to reach out to, hey, how can you and your company help? What's the best way for them to learn more about you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can visit my website. It's Stokes Counseling and Consulting.com, Stokes Counseling and Consulting.com. And then my phone number is 407 205 7734. Or
7734?
7734.
Okay.
Or you can shoot me an email at the letter J, my last name, Stokes, Stokes, at stokescounselingandconsulting.com.
We'll put this in the show notes.
Great.
The last thing we do now is called the lightning round. When I go literally random, maybe a minute of questions. Your job is to answer these as quick as we can. My job is hopefully to try to get you a giggle. This is straight Uncle Rico, 2-minute offense. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. If I opened your phone, last song played.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Southern Cross.
Ooh, there we go. I can play that on the guitar. What's the one song you would not want us to know that you last listened to?
Oh gosh. Fleetwood Mac. I like Fleetwood Mac, so I'm not ashamed of that. Gosh. I don't know. I'm proud of all the music I listen to, honestly.
Here we go. If you were to play one professional sport that people don't know, what would it be?
Football.
Okay. If you were to go play, I'm not sure if you're a golfer, but we're going to assume you are. If you had to go play golf today, who is your dream foursome you're going to put together?
The dream what? I'm sorry?
Dream foursome. So you and 3 other people.
Oh, Tiger Woods, Nicholas, and I'm not much of a golfer, but Bubba.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. That'd be an eclectic group. If there was to be a book written about your life, what would be the title?
Here and Now.
There we go. Now, I always like asking this question. So this book now has just crushed it. New York Times bestseller. The Hollywood press has picked it up. We're making a movie out of it. It's winning Golden Globe awards. But tell me, who is going to star you in this role?
Oh man, that's a good one. Gosh, who's going to star me in this role? Jeez. The Rock.
You know what's interesting? A guy I interviewed recently, he said that too recently. Dwayne Johnson has been a key actor, fill in for people.
I don't know who looks like me. I don't know. People tell me there was a musical artist that people said I look like. Jack Johnson. People have told me I look like
I
Jack.
could see that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's not an actor. So
I could see a little Ben Affleck.
I've gotten that before. I should have said Ben Affleck.
Well, maybe Ben Affleck will be your stunt double in case you like any stunts, just to get crazy at like jumping off of. Last question: 2 words to describe your wife.
Loyal and generous.
There we go. Lightning round is over. You made it through it. Dr. Jeremiah Stokes, everybody. I want to say a huge shout out to our sponsors who continue to support us. Catch Sitka Seafoods, best fish ever. I'm not just saying that. They don't send me fish for free. I buy it. I love to buy it right out of the Sitka, Alaska harbor. We crushed some fish tacos over the break. Check them out at catchsitkaseafoods.com. And Acme Homes, amazing home builder. I know we're talking to a gentleman in Florida, but people in the state of Washington, check these guys out. Amazing craftsmanship. They got homes in Eastern Washington and Western Washington. Dr. Jeremiah Stokes, it's been an honor to speak with you. I appreciate all the stories. This has been a deep, deep conversation that I've really, it's going to fill me up for the rest of the day, brother, but I really appreciate your time, and a huge shout out to Patrick Surmeyer for connecting us.
Casey, this was a blast, man. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, man. Have a great day.
You too.
Well, thank you guys so much for all your support. One thing I have not asked of you fellow loyal QB Dadcast listeners is go to iTunes right now. Please leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star review. Let us know what you like. Let us know areas where we can improve. If you listen on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, Amazon Music, we're on every podcast player. So please take time to leave us a review. It's going to help us get this Quarterback Dadcast out there to other dads who are looking to improve. So I appreciate your guys' support, and we will see you next week for another episode.